Are we rolling right now?
Jetson, introduce yourself. All right.
He's sleeping. That's Chad's dog. He's sick and tired of seeing Bonnie and Murphy. We are rolling. Cool. All right, guys. Everybody's been talking about the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. What does Road to Housing stand for? Or no, just road?
Renewing opportunity in the American dream.
Well said. I'm inspired. Are you? We're all inspired? He's inspired. Yeah, so we wanted to dig into that, give our own impressions on what's going on, break into some ideas that we feel haven't been addressed. So without further ado, my name is Robert.
My name is Chad.
This is Intellectually, the show where we teach you how to hold us, the professionals, more accountable in real estate. Let's get this thing going. And that was it. That was the entrance. Cool. So let's get this thing started. What's currently going on with it? We don't want to get too political, obviously. We are not political pundits, politicians, or aiming to source any agenda besides show off how awesome we are. But we can name some facts. It was pretty unanimous in the House and the Senate, and that's already been passed vote-wise, correct?
Yep, it is sitting on the president's desk right now as we speak.
What was it, 5 were against it in the Senate or the House? I forget.
I believe it was the Senate.
Cool. Yeah, so it was pretty unanimous. And what that means is now it's on the president's desk, and traditionally he has 2 options. But since it was so unanimous, there is a third option, and that's just to let it sit, right? And it'll probably automatically be approved if he's to let it sit past that 10-day regimen. So he could either veto it, pass it, or let it sit, and this time it will likely pass. That being said, he is letting it sit with a advised agenda that he also wants what other bill taken seriously.
Well, he factored this 21st Century Road to Housing Act and categorized it as a big yawn, along with many other bills that weren't the Save America Act.
Yeah. So pretty serious about the Save America Act and getting that passed. And he's probably utilizing this as an opportunity just to get that going, not for or against the idea. We're not here to talk about that political agenda. We are more interested in when or if this bill passes, what does that mean for you, the homeowner, the investor, and a new concept, manufactured home buyer and leaser. So just some different areas of opportunity. Obviously, we could start with the biggest thing people are loving to talk about. What is that?
Well, when you say biggest, do you mean
most interested?
Most interested. Topic. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the restrictions on large institutional investors and what they are trying to do.
So it's so funny. We like see so many videos on this, right? And everybody just has the same, no offense to you guys that have spent time editing your YouTube videos or your posts, but you're not really getting into the meat of this topic. It's instead just saying, here's the philosophy behind why big investors, they're categorizing them as what? These investors are, what's their category, 350 plus?
Yeah, so to be considered an institutional investor, you need to own at least 350 or more homes.
Yeah.
But that's not even considering all investors. Those are just investors that own 350.
Very large.
Very large.
Did we have a list of the top 5 single-family home investors? Hannah, can you look that up for us real quick? Just look up, I just want to get a rationale. I can name a couple, but let's just name them. And if you could also get us some ideas of how many actual single-family homes they own. The ratio is obviously pretty small versus the overall single-family residential.
Are you talking about the names of the companies?
Yeah.
Because this pulled up Invitation Homes.
Invitation Homes is one of them. I think Invitation is the largest.
With Residential, Progress Residential, Predium Partners.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting why this is the hottest topic over there, and I can understand why, especially if you don't understand the numbers behind it, actually.
Well, it is cool, and I could see some for or against it. But let's give some scenarios. I know Invitational owns about 86,000, right? Can you look up what these other companies that you went through, how many single-family residents they own on average? and let's partake in a couple ideas here. I think we looked it up, 1,058 or 56 single family residential homes are zoned that way in the United States, right?
I'm getting that Invitation Homes, 86,000
Yep.
owned,
Mm-hmm.
AMH 60, Tricon 38, Progress 85, Pretium 90,000.
Pretium is 90,000.
Yeah, it's
I thought Invitational was the largest. So I
Those
guess
are pretty
it's
big numbers. And
Yeah.
one thing to clear up, this is not going to force any of these investors to sell these properties.
They're getting grandfathered in.
They are getting grandfathered in. What is restricting them is any future purchases of
Yeah.
these new single family homes.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if, another thing to be conscious of is these individuals aren't running the streets, right? Checking out Zillow, looking to snatch up that next home that's, a home buyer could use instead. Usually they're getting their properties traditionally, from my opinion, from other investors diversifying their portfolio, right? So you might not even really see these properties go on to the major market sometimes because they might be like a withheld listing. They might not hit the MLS. They might not be professionally represented by a real estate agent. They might simply diversify and be reinvested by these major companies. So that one is going to, I guess we'll get into it, but that's going to be a contributor to adding inventory to the housing market because now they cannot diversify these portfolios. You said they're absorbing about 12% of the market right now.
So in the past decade, from
Yeah.
2015 to 2025, institutional investors accounted for
350,000 plus owners.
350 plus owners.
Oh, 350 plus.
Yes.
Sorry.
So
1,000.
they accounted
That'd be
for
crazy.
12% of all investor purchases,
Mm-hmm.
not owner occupied or not non-investor purchases. So here's a little bit of stat to help understand.
So when you said owner occupied, but all investor purchases, so that means they're not only counting residential single family is what you're saying?
no,
So this is residential single family.
yeah. So
okay, cool.
We'll look in this term. In the U.S., it's estimated there's roughly 92 million single-family homes within the U.S. It's also estimated that institution or investors as a whole, and this includes small investors, mom and pop shops that own less than 10 properties, all the way up to institutional investors that own 350 plus properties. They own 644,000 single-family homes, all investors, which accounts to what? Less than 1% of all the homes that are owned. Single-family homes that are owned.
600 what?
644,000 single-family homes owned by investors.
No, that math doesn't
Yes, it
add
does.
up. Well, think about it. 644. They own 644,000, right?
Correct.
But I thought we looked up a stat that showed 1,058,000. Hold me. Correct me.
I am incorrect. Sorry,
Okay.
I was reading this wrong.
Okay.
These are only institutional investors.
Okay.
Not all investors, excuse me. 350 institutional investors that own 350 homes or more.
Yeah.
They own 644,000 single-family homes. Not all investors, just institutional investors.
So they own 650. How many single family residential homes are there in the United
92
States?
million.
92 million. Okay. So we got 92 million. I don't know where I was getting that other stupid number. I was losing it.
So
Having a brain moment, right? So we got 92 million and they're owning 650 what was it?
let's just say 645,000.
645. And that's so I'll do the math real quick just so we can get that into our brains. We're going to go 645 100,000 divided by 92 million, right? So we're looking at, it's pretty crazy. So 0.007, which is about 0.7% of the market, right?
And another interesting, in between 2015 and 2025, institutional investors made up that 12% of all investors, but investors as a whole, small investors, less than 10 properties, medium investors, they consider 100 to, 11 to 99.
Yeah.
And then large investors, they are characterized as 100 to 349, and then institutional investors are 350 plus.
So run through the names of those one more time, just so we can summarize it for the listener.
Small investors, mom and pop
Are
shops,
considered, how many?
yes, they own 10 or less
10 or less.
rental
Next.
properties. Medium-sized investors, they own 11 to 99
Yep.
single-family homes.
11 to 99, so under 100 technically. 100 or
Large
less.
investors are 100 to 349.
So 350 or less, and then
Institutional investors are anybody that owns over 350.
so they're targeting these individuals on a number, right? So technically, this act creates these categories, right?
So if you combine all of these into one big pot as investors, they accounted for 5.5 million home purchases since 2015, and that is roughly 8.7% of the actual amount of single-family residential home sales there were. 58 million by non-investors.
Okay. So we got this idea, right, where this act, so far, what we've diagnosed is this act is planning to remove, over the past years, a 12% inventory taker and diversify 12% of that withheld inventory to the rest of the consumers, right? So if we're removing 12% of the demand, right, that's obviously going to weaken the market in some areas. But when we say some areas, another detail is the fact that these investors aren't just randomly buying houses, right? They're buying houses in certain zip codes. They're buying locations in areas that are, they're basically staying in the calculated areas, correct? So it's not that all of a sudden we're going to get this huge influx of inventory. It's very important that you as the buyer or you as the seller can recognize where these major, in fact, hannahb, if you don't have the stats, it'd be cool if you looked up where these major investors hold their zip codes and what kind of states and cities they might hold these or focus these property ownership in. Then that can kind of tell, investors and or homeowners what they're looking to deal with, right? There's a map right there. Take a screenshot of that and we'll post it on the show. But aesthetically, these are the areas, right?
Places like Dallas,
Yep.
Phoenix, San Francisco, Atlanta.
Yeah.
A lot of the Sunbelt cities.
It's not surprising, right? Because this is where the market boomed, took off, right? And it's not, how can I put it? It's not going to strengthen these areas, because what was the stat over the past 10 years? Obviously, during 2020 to 2023, we had probably a lot of purchases, but over the past 3 years, how many purchases have these investors been making? These three.
I don't know the exact stats, but I do know it's been steadily. It peaked in 2021, and it's
Peaked
been
in
steadily
2021.
declining ever since then.
Not surprising, right? Because prices are getting higher. They're diversifying their portfolios elsewhere. But that being said, right, we're not going to get a huge influx of houses and inventory on the market
plus this
because
isn't-
they don't got to give up their properties.
This isn't necessarily considering the fact that so essentially that 12% number of institutional investors, that 12% of purchases that they were making out of all investors, so that number is going to go to zero because it's going to be new home purchases. So they're not allowed to make any more new home purchases. But what was interesting is they weren't even the lowest sector of the investors that were making purchases. In large investors, that is 100 to 349 properties, only was about 8% of those purchases. So there's nothing eliminating or nothing stopping these large corporations from purchasing more if they're under that threshold. So do you, I guess what I'm asking is, are we going to see, I don't necessarily think we're going to see this huge flood of inventory in the market, whereas there's these other small investors, medium-sized investors, and small investors that have no restrictions still.
Well, there's going to be theoretically a price correction somewhere. So a lot of these markets that this is going to, that these investors are predominantly investing in or have invested in, are already markets that are suffering a reset, right? Homes have been sitting on the market a lot longer. We've seen a lot higher price deduction on listed properties. But in theory, right, these focused markets that we're showing you, right, these are where they've already purchased since 2021. Where are now the hotter markets for investing? Midwest, right? Midwest is really taking some investment styles. Florida was a big investor style, but I'm seeing a lot of Midwest investors moving around this area. Pull that map back up, and what do we have when it comes to the Midwest areas? Okay, so we're in St. Louis, right? So that's a little hot. Go up near the Great Lakes. Let's see. Okay. So, I mean, arguably, it's hard to predict where we're going to see an inventory influx, right? But if they already have the numbers in these market resets areas, those big colored areas, right? They're obviously going to be more prone to invest there because they understand that market. So maybe we'll see a buyer's market start to come back a little bit, right? In those areas, which is good because we're depleting some of the competition by, accurately speaking, 12%. Your argument is that these other investors that don't hit that 350 threshold will be the first to capitalize on this in probably three ways, right? One, they're already hunting the market educationally and actively, right? Two, they probably have the connections needed to get there firsthand on the private market. And then three, they have the capital, right? But that being said, that doesn't mean that your average home buyer might not have a better chance, better shot. Your small investors might, have a better shot now, just a little bit more inventory, especially when you're counting 12%.
Absolutely. There's 12% of the competition that's gone.
Yeah. So let's look at it this way on another point. It also makes me a little bit nervous, right? If you have these smaller investors get an influx of inventory and opportunity, I mean, this is the biased point of view. I got nothing to back it up, but I've seen more that smaller property owners and smaller investors have a tougher time creating a quality environment for their tenant. Is that a fair statement to say? New small investors usually resort to property management companies, which are third party, not as interested in or not as proud. I see a lot of investors that own, 5 to 10 properties that may not uphold a quality standard because they're not really looking at ROI as systematically. Some of these major investors, one, decrease. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that we're limiting these 350 plus investors, but these institutional investors also understand the market, customer satisfaction, quality of life, and they're easier to be held accountable, so they're going to be watching out for that more. So could this lead into an area of renting where the quality of renting has gone down a little bit? Theory, I don't know. Just something to look into. I could be wrong.
I'm not contrary to that, of course.
Yeah, challenge
these
it.
larger institutions versus your mom and pop shops are going to be in some ways more likely to be less intimate, right, with their tenants. And I don't mean actually physically, but knowing them, getting to know them, also being local, and because at the end of the day, you talk about them potentially liking the institutional investors, but where does that really fall on at the end of the day?
Agreed.
They're property management companies.
Agreed. So I'm interested. We should post a question out there just to see how many people that are more personally involved with their landlord end up having a good experience in the long run, right? Because there's that famous saying, don't mix friends and family with business. And renting and leasing is not a party. It's a business, right? So the closer you get to your renter, the more biased opinions can become. My opinion is always to separate yourself to keep the respect and the morals at that ground level. It's a thought. What I mean?
So there's obviously arguments for the institutional. They have professional property management, standardize their maintenance systems, 24/7 maintenance and online service requests. Those are always very convenient and helpful.
Now those can happen and likely will happen with smaller owners, but keep going.
But you're correct. Consistent housing quality across portfolios. Of course, but probably more consistency. As far as the argument for small landlords, again, more personal relationships with tenants, greater flexibility when tenants face hardships, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, agreed. That could be interesting as well.
More discretion on lease terms and payment arrangements. So again, a little bit more flexibility. More likely to own properties long term in a community, which is also very true. They're more likely to hold on to them longer in their community that they know very well.
That makes sense.
And
So it's cool. Those are some good arguments.
And last one's, this is funny because this doesn't make sense, but less market concentration, which
Where are you focusing this information from? Where are you sourcing it?
these are just opinion based. These are not
These are just
anything
arguments you're
fast. They're
presenting.
just good arguments to
That's
consider.
cool. They're interesting arguments. So obviously none of that is factually backed, but they do raise an idea for communication on the idea. If I were to say an investor hiring a property management company, they're thinking a little bit more, trying to save money here and there, so they might go cheaper on the property management company. And there are a lot of property management companies out there, and without vetting these property management companies, you find out that there's a higher chance that they are not quality, and your return for their services end up going more negative than positive. So just vet your property management company strategically with objectives of 5 and 10 years, what you want to get out of them, and hold them, read the documents they send you before you sign them.
So ultimately,
Yeah.
this portion of this act, is it really going to make a significant difference? Are we going to be able to, or, this gets passed, this restriction falls in line, is it going to change and create better supply and better housing affordability?
Only
That's
one
the
can
idea,
see.
right?
Yeah, one can see. We're not forcing them to give us their properties. They're grandfathered in, so they don't have to sell. I guess 3 areas I could see it changing. Back me up on these, right? And we haven't talked about one of them, right? We're gonna add more inventory, so we're gonna add a little bit to a buyer's market, right? Because we're gonna take away 12% of the buyers. We're gonna stimulate.
That's not true.
Not 12% of the buyers, 12% of the preserved inventory, right? We're going to put 12% of the inventory back onto the major market statistically over the past 10 years.
I mean, that's in hopes, right? That doesn't, just because institutional investors aren't buying these properties does not necessarily mean these properties are going right to owner occupants.
Agreed.
Right.
Not saying that. I'm saying in general, we are depleting buyers that take up 12% of the inventory mathematically.
They take up 1%. That 12% is of all investors.
Oh.
So, essentially what we're saying, so small landlords, mom and pop shops own the majority of all single family owned properties by investors at roughly 34%.
So what's the 12% stat specifically?
So if you were to add up all of the single family home purchases by an investor,
Yeah.
you lump them in, so you're not including non-investing purchases, investor purchases. They account for 12% of all investor purchases.
Okay, so how many properties do institutional investors own or take up of the consistent
1%.
market?
So essentially, over the past decade, they've only accounted for 1% of total home purchases, single family home purchases.
Evenly, or are we meditating around there? Okay,
it's approximately, and then again, it's estimated that
Thank you for correcting
institutional investors, again, solely the ones that are at 350 plus or more, they own less than 1% of all of the homes in the U.S. Out of 92 million homes, they own less than 650,000, which is less than 1% of all the homes.
But I mean like active transactions, the kinetic side of the industry.
1%.
1%. And what is that number of 1% of? Do we have that?
So as of from 2015 to 2025, investors as a whole made up 5.5 million home purchasers out of like 64 million in a decade. So investors as a whole.
So in the past 10 years, they've made up 5.5.
These are investors as a whole.
Dominating year is 2021.
So that's 8.7% of all home purchases within the last decade made by any type of investor.
Got you.
Okay.
And I wonder if there's some errors in tracking too when it comes to package deals.
So that's 8.7% total of all investors. Now, institutional purchases, so if we're going to break it down even further, institutional investors, out of all of the 64 million home purchases that happened, they only accounted for 660,000 over the past decade.
Okay, so 660,000. And we can't divide that by 10 because, once again, we know 2021 was the biggest one. So when it comes to consistent, yeah, I mean, we could dig into the math, but I think it's healthier that we move on. You're right. It's not going to add too much inventory. But the fact that it's specific zip codes could stimulate some of those
And it
markets to
will.
revive.
But
a little
even
bit.
in those specific zip codes, like in the Sunbelt cities where it's very high,
Yeah,
it's been estimated to only max out at roughly like 4.4% of all purchases.
interesting.
So it's
Yeah.
not even 5% of all purchases in all in the hottest areas of where
Yeah.
we're seeing this. Which brings us to the. Did he just?
No.
All right. Which brings us to the point, right? That what you really should be looking at, right? This Housing Act, it is a good thing, or at least this restriction
Well, it's just
on
one of the few
institutional.
things we've already dug in. How much time do
But
we have?
If you
We're
think
at
it's
25.
if
so.
you think it's going to truly make the impact that you think it will, no, you're looking at the wrong thing.
Good call.
I would,
I'm glad you corrected that 12%. I hope you guys are making it, can conclude this systematically, right? 12% is all investors. And then of those investors, the 350 plus owners stimulated 685 or 600, what was it? Over the past 10 years?
Over the past 10 years, institutional investors have purchased roughly 660,000 homes.
660,000 homes. So that's over 10 years. Yeah, that's not a crazy level of inventory take. There are some other things that they're going to do to strengthen buying power to the buyers, thus also the properties. And they're particularly focusing on lower valued homes, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So the two areas that they are is obviously they're increasing capabilities to get smaller loans, particularly loans under 100,000 in the FHA category. Let's elaborate real quick with what FHA is, right, Hannah? Do you know what FHA stands for?
The Federal Housing Administration.
Oh, very good.
Yay.
So
not first time home buyer.
no. And not Fair Housing Act if you think about it. But anyways, so
Never thought about that.
Federal Housing Administration is a big loan, especially for some potential homeowners that might not hit the threshold when it comes to credit, might not hit the threshold when it comes to debt to income ratio. This type of loan is a governmentally backed loan.
It lowers the bar to entry.
It lowers the bar to entry because it takes the government takes on some of the risk. And one of the things that these kind of loans create is more friction or tediousness during the closing process.
Essentially, your standards and bar is lower to get in and be approved for the loan, but the standards for the property itself are higher.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. You know,
Agreed.
Essentially, you're
Agreed. Yeah, so anything involving the government is going to be tedious, right? Try to get your driver's license.
They're
Right?
going to want to make sure if they're going to insure or if they're going to back this loan that the property is not falling
It's got to
apart.
cross T's and dot certain I's that they say. So some of these T's and some of these I's, they're saying, hey, it's okay if these aren't dotted or crossed.
And actually, I think we should go into another point before you get into that. I'd like to end on what you're going to end with that, because
Okay, elaborate on where you
So essentially, so you're talking about a little bit more ability that the government's doing to give some buyers a little bit more ability. That's just one part of this act, right? The whole idea behind this act is, in essence, to increase our housing supply and fight back against our housing shortage as a whole.
Yeah,
I think
and this is not just this certain portion of the act.
because what you're getting to, I think, is really good to end on, because I think that's important.
Fair enough. Take it away.
The idea to really behind this is really to increase and create less friction, I guess, when it comes to building new homes.
Building new homes, getting approved for some homes that might end up scaring away some transactions, and then adding a new, I would argue, new piece of inventory to the market.
So right now it's estimated, and I don't necessarily like this term and how they do it, but it's estimated at about 3.8 to almost 5.5 million homes that we're short, single-family homes that we're short in this country. It's a rough estimate. don't like it. But
Elaborate on that, because that's
just how they go about it, you can never really get a true understanding, right? Are you talking vacancy? Are you talking, the amount of families versus the amount of available housing? There's so many different ways to look at it. So again, I'd say that estimate is fairly, it's a good range. So we're 4 million homes short in America for housing, and what we've seen, especially since 2022 and 2023, we've seen new construction homes just start trending down and continuously trending down. We're not producing right now as many homes as we used to, especially prior to 2008, 2010, when they really took a dip, right? Then we started going back up, and now we're coming down again. So really, we're really in an instance where we don't have enough housing shortages. But why? Why has there been a halt in new construction? Why has the process been slower? And then ultimately, because the process is slower, everything is becoming more expensive, right? Why is that happening is really the reason I believe that this act is being passed, and the things that are truly going to help. Right?
Well, the recognition for the act, and who knows, the fact that this act is being held could also be a stimulant for the housing market to motivate buyers to come out, right? It's funny how we say we are short inventory when we also are attempting to stimulate more buyers to come out under the market. You're like, Doesn't make sense. And then we're trying to stimulate buyers to come out on the market, but then we're also trying to stimulate sellers to sell their home. We're like, but we also are trying to get sellers to lower the value of their home. There's just a bunch of mixed and matched verbiage. I guess you could conclude it into, let's see, maybe I could get into 5 different areas that I would believe is contributing to this stigma. First one, interest rates. No matter what interest rates look like, people look at them as bad. So they're less motivated to lose this loan that has such a low interest rate and reprise into a new property with a higher mortgage, right? That can sometimes be 30% higher. The other thing is the cost of building with, fuel prices, as well as just inflation on materials is definitely going up tremendously. The cost of insuring and getting different licenses for these buildings are also going up tremendously, right? Insurance alone had a huge reset. So that's also affecting motivation to build.
Well, and I want to dig deeper into that, because part of the reason what this act is trying to do is, again, create less friction with that. So you talk about it's becoming more difficult and more expensive to build new build homes. Well, why? Right? You have permitting, you have environmental regulations that they have to follow. You have so many different things that need to be done.
Yeah, requirements and restrictions
that have only got increased over time.
And a lot of them have aged, right? And when you age, it's kind of like, I came out with this new bolt, but you're still using the old screw, and you're like, figure out a way to make it screw on anyway.
Yep. So because of this, it takes builders, they have more hurdles to get over, and it takes them longer to build, right? And all of this, time is money, right? So they are losing money, and that's why you see this huge influx of builders shifting towards building high-end homes versus that sweet spot in the middle where you have these starter homes at 300 to 350,000, because it's just not cost effective for them to build it.
One could argue the quality of builds go down too, because I can only imagine with all the red tape you got to cut through, by the time you get there, you're like, crap, I forgot to tighten that screw, because mid-tighten, I got a call from a guy who just called me up saying, hey, this and this is end up going to get extended by 2 weeks because it wasn't approved in time. You know what I mean? So, there could be a quality efficiency, or others could say because of this, it'll stimulate and lower the quality. But I would argue that it's going to affect a higher quality standard because you can actually get
that's what
focus on it.
The act is ultimately just trying to lessen these regulations and these hurdles and these permitting and these surveying that they need to go to so they can get construction done quicker and cheaper.
So what does the act effectively execute here that we're trying to say and hint at?
Do you want to read it?
No, I know. Just try to summarize it best you can into, like, if you were trying to tell your nephew, it's going to be crazy, buddy.
They are deciding to on a
Less than
federal level have less rules or less,
Less
regulations when it comes to building permits and actually building and getting it done.
And they're focusing on the tedious ones that might not hold as much value, but might produce more friction.
And
right.
the thing about this act too is this is a federal act, but what we know about real estate and surveying and land and all of this is done by the state and municipalities, right?
Yep.
And there's so many different municipalities that have so many different rules. So this act is not, or this act is not going to come over and put a blanket over all of these existing regulations that they have. It's in a way to encourage the states and the local municipalities and the cities to start to conform and make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I could tell Hannah's eyes are glazing. So,
Trying to get you a showing for your bar, so.
oh, there you go. But which reminds me, we got to be in St. Louis Hills tomorrow, 9:30. So let's encompass what we spoke about so far, and then I want to go on to a cool theory that I had, and then we'll move on to your closing idea, right? So first we talked about everybody's favorite part, 350 max, right, for institutional investors or for anybody technically, right? 350 max. It is grandfathered in if you own more than 350. And if you, let's say, one extracurricular thing, if there are some caveats around, if you build your own home, you actually can own it for a period of time, but then you have to relinquish it to a private homeowner or something like that. But look into that yourself. That's the first thing.
And this
kind of
act
addressed.
only addresses and only restricts institutional investors, which only make up less than 1%.
Well, yeah.
All the homes that are.
Well, I do want to make clear, right? We're accidentally categorizing these institutional investors. Everybody can be an institutional investor, right? You know,
Even me?
even you. But the idea is, right? It's going to create more institutional investors.
Well, that was my point, right? Those
Yeah.
large investors, that share is going to get larger.
It's good. The shares, the diversification of it is going to get larger, but inevitably we are depleting certain buyers, which adds to the buyer's market, right? That being said, that's the first portion. Then we talked a little bit about the idea that FHA itself is having they're cleaning up the highway a little bit for FHA loans. You guys are aware of what an FHA loan is. If not, rewind it. But this kind of popular loan is now going to lessen some restrictions on properties, particularly pertaining around that $100,000 or less, right? So not only are they attempting to stimulate the market with more inventory from these institutional 350 plus owners, these properties are likely to be in that $100,000 range, and they're lessening those restrictions to stimulate first-time home buyers, owner occupancy buyers. So two things to coalesce.
And it's also in some ways stimulating some extra grants and whatnot to help improve the property or land as well. Again, look into those grants.
Yep. And do keep in mind, if you're not aware, in FHA, you have to live on the property for the first year, and you can have only one active FHA loan. Right. So that being said, if you want to buy another house on an FHA loan, you either have to sell your previous house or refinance it into a conventional or any other. So what that means is they're making this FHA loan easier to get for these newly addressed properties that have been added to the market theoretically. Right. And when I say added to the market, I really mean added to the market because remember, rewinding back to it, a lot of these institutional investors probably get a lot of their properties from private market. Right.
Well, that's
it's still going to be there, but you might be a little bit more motivated now to put it on the mass market, and you might be more motivated because it might be easier to get more money from it because you have easier avenues for homeowners to buy that property. You know, the investors want to sell it for top dollar. That's it. Now, that being said, there's another cool thing that a lot of people are not addressing with this act or even talking about. This is an interesting thing, right? What time are we on?
38, 50.
If you want to mark it, 38. So this is an interesting concept, right? We're talking manufactured homes. And in most states, I think there's only like 6 to 15 or something states that allow a real estate agent to market a manufactured home that sits on a leased property. Right. And then there's even requirements there. But we're talking about manufactured homes in general. There's two things that this act is going to aesthetically do. What is that material that it has to sit on called? chats.
I don't think.
Look it up real quick. The two, I forget what it's called.
That what? Manufactured homes sit on?
Yeah, it's like a platform that they need.
Slab?
No, it's like a chastel, or I forget the name of it.
Pier and beam permanent concrete slab basement.
Yeah. No, it's not that. It's for manufactured homes. Hold on. I want to know. Chassis. Okay,
Oh,
cool.
it's just chat.
Yeah, so chassis is basically traditionally for the construction of these properties, the property needs to sit on a chassis, right? Which is basically a platform to build your manufactured home on or relocate it for maneuverability. That's no longer going to be required, which is going to save on average these manufactured home builders $5,000 to $10,000. And we know manufactured homes are becoming more and more popular because efficiency and technology is becoming more and more popular. And ever since Elon Musk was like, yeah, I live in technically a manufactured home, if you want to, not technically, but arguably a manufactured home, it's just getting more popular. It's cool now, right? So we go to that idea. The chassis is not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on this reality that an FHA loan, we're coming back to this, traditionally for a single family manufactured home, only allowed loan approval limit up to around 100, give or take $105,000, right? This bill, theoretically, the verbiage of it, and where I found this verbiage, I wrote it down. Where I found this verbiage was from, what is his name? Congress. His name is, either way, I'll come back to it. But aesthetically, they're saying that this bill in Section 303 is due to double the lending limit of FHA availability, the limit to give buyers of manufactured homes an additional 107%, which means your 105 theoretically will now become a 220 or a 230, which is crazy to me because we just increased the buying power for these properties tremendously. We opened up a huge avenue for these kinds of properties, right? What does that do to the housing market, right? Does that decrease or increase the value of properties, right? In my eyes, we were talking about it earlier, college itself is a completely separate avenue, but a comparison. College used to be tremendously cheap in the $10,000 range, right? To get an education at a college. But after FAFSA was released and funding by the government, these colleges started to increase their prices along the lines of the availability. The government increased the buying power of a college degree. And because the buying power was increased, the value of the product went up tremendously. And now the average college degree is, $40,000 plus. Well, we just increased the buying power by an additional, if this bill passed, by an additional 107% in manufactured homes, which in general is becoming more versatile and lucrative. And they're lowering standards for qualifications of a manufactured home and the build power of it. It's interesting to think about. This bill is aesthetically attempting to stabilize the housing market, but there's a very interesting area where we just said, wait a second, didn't you just add to one of the major causes of inflation by giving borrowing power to a property that is getting more popular, right? And you just increased its value or availability in a certain area by 107%. So I'm just interested to see how this will be viewed. This is Section 303, how it will be viewed by the public, how it will be viewed by manufactured home builders. And in general, if I was a home builder, right, my idea would be like, man, inventory's low, buyers are not hunting, interest is up and costs are up, but manufactured homes, they just went down in price and they just went up in value. I might move my whole business over here, right? Statistically, it's just an interesting
And
idea.
then what's going to happen to these
To
starter homes in these middle class?
Yeah, it's just
homes?
crazy. So,
because
like,
they're already starting to not. I mean, they've already been not building these types of homes.
It's a weird thing. And now I understand the idea of being like, oh, well, we got to get more homeowners. That's good. But, you know, if you have this mentality where you're thinking, hey, this bill is going to bring down prices of houses, there's a lot of intuitive ideas running through it when you start to look into it. And that was one of the most interesting things that nobody's talking about. Everybody's focusing on this 350 plus homeowner investor, right? And it's going to stimulate the inventory. I mean, it's going to stimulate it no more than when Trump passed, what was it, $250 billion? Like, look what that did. Nobody even noticed it, right? But there's this other thing that we just increased the value tremendously for manufactured homes, and we made it cheaper and easier to build them. And we're trying to stimulate more inventory in the housing market. And we're like, it sounds counterintuitive to me if you're trying to correct a big problem, but I appreciate the fact that a lot of people can buy more manufactured homes. Right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, people are viewing this and looking at the wrong things. But you know, this is one of the largest housing affordability act that's been passed. I don't know, in the past decade, at least in my lifetime, or our generation, right? And it's very important to understand that we aren't going to see these changes and these impacts overnight. This is you know, these are the things that are going to take 5-10 years to really truly see the impact. As we start to see these regulations ease up and these builders are having the ability to build more and build cheaper and build, I don't want to say less, but less home.
Yeah.
Right? Smaller homes. You know, that's the whole idea. You know, but in place, especially like here in St. Louis, you got to think too, you know, one of the biggest hiccups here I would argue is due to the actual cost of the undeveloped land, which also.
So there's a whole nother thing that we could get into, but how much time do we have?
We're almost at 50 minutes.
The ability to advertise undeveloped land is going to be an interesting concept, right? Just publicly advertising undeveloped land is another thing. I recommend you guys look into it. We don't want to beat this act with a stick anymore, but to kind of close down the idea, right? When people are getting all excited about this $350 or 350 property owner, it's not as exciting or drastic as you believe. This FHA amplification on standards for properties under or around $100,000 is going to be okay, but it's going to take time to really stimulate. I'm interested in the manufactured home industry, so I recommend you guys follow up on that. And finally, keep an eye out if you're a land investor, because you're about to see a huge stimulation of land advertising. And if you're the first there, you might be able to get that worm, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Did you have any other contributions, John?
I had a good time.
That was good. It's hot in here. So anyways, we're going to go play some Frisbee at Forest Park.
It's 97 degrees outside.
It's going to be 97 degrees. Chad's going to throw up. He threw up last time. Not to be.
I did.
Well, you didn't eat. You should have. You just drank a bunch of water. But
and
either way,
some whiskey.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That was a bad idea. Anyways, yeah.
Bad idea.
So, guys, this was Intellectually. My name is Robert.
My name is Chad.
And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you.